Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to the Parkside Merchant channel. We're going to be continuing today with another installment in this video series where I'm going through basically my favorite top 10 cards from each of the 11 original Yu-Gi-Oh sets. So we're now up to Pharaonic Guardian here today. We've done a whole bunch of the previous sets, obviously, before this, so you can always check those videos out on the channel if you're interested to see my thoughts on those ones. But Pharaonic Guardian, interesting set. It's an okay set. I think it's respectable. Some of the cards are pretty interesting. There's a lot of good sort of Egyptian themes and things in the artwork here. So for some folks, this is a real standout set. For me, it's okay. It's certainly not my favorite set, but there are a couple of cards in here that I do like quite a bit. So, before we dive in here, for folks that are new to the channel, we do talk about all kinds of stuff related to vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! And so if you are interested in this sort of subject matter, as well as Pokemon, sports cards, trading cards, we do talk about a lot of that sort of stuff. So feel free to like, subscribe, all that sort of good stuff, and welcome aboard. So let's go ahead and maybe dive in here. First card that I have on my list is Dark Room of Nightmare. Now, I should say as well that I'm not really ranking these cards according to like level of value or like, rarity or anything like that. This is more just kind of like the cards that I remember and the cards that I like the most from each set. I think what I liked about this card, I guess it had sort of a mysterious kind of a dark artwork to it, and it just always kind of stood out to me as like a creepy, just a spooky card. It has these shadowy figures in this dark dungeon-like space that was very spooky. It always reminded me of the Tomb Keepers, right? A lot like Odeon and Merrick and his parents down there in the cellar, or in that, whatever it was, basement or crypt or tomb or wherever they were living there down underground. So this always kind of reminded me of that space that they lived in. It was just a spooky card, but I think it makes my top 10 for the most memorable or interesting cards for me from this particular set. Next up, we have the Gravekeeper's Chief. I think I never liked this card much as a kid because it was kind of spooky. This guy's face is like, he looks really freaked out about something. And I just always thought it was kind of a freaky card, but it's a memorable card for sure because the guy's face looks like so, just like startled and scared over something or freaked out. So, I think that's why I liked the card, is that it just stood out to me. It's just an interesting kind of a spooky, off-putting kind of an artwork, if you will. Next card is the Barrel Behind the Door. Now, I think the appeal for this was a couple of things. Obviously, it's got some explorer kind of elements to it, like an Indiana Jones sort of a thing going on. And I was always intrigued by sort of the character there that's like opening this trap and is about to get, ensnared or shot with whatever contraption this thing is here behind the door. So just thought it was interesting. Also, it does sort of resemble a firearm of sorts, like an ancient firearm or a musket to a degree, which is also interesting because there are not a lot of firearms in the vintage Yu-Gi-Oh cards for the most part. It's mostly swords and spears and lances and pikes and things like that. Very rarely do you see anything that bears resemblance to like a barreled weapon or a rifled weapon or anything like that. So just an interesting card, certainly one that stood out to me as a child, and one that I always thought was interesting. Next card, we have Nonaggression Area. This is another one of these cards that just always kind of stood out in my memory as something that I thought was interesting. I think there were two things that I liked about this card. The first was I always played a lot of video games as a kid, and a lot of times in video games, when you got to the end of the map, or if you got to the end of the zone that the developers had put work into, you walked into a wall like this, right? Some kind of a barrier that prevented you from going to the next part of the map, or that literally was the end of the map, the edge of the world. And this has always kind of reminded me of that, right? That notion that there's like barriers, essentially. And that's exactly what it looked like to me. It was basically the wall that you would run into in some of these like early open world games a long time ago. It was just basically a wall, right? You couldn't go anywhere. You just ran into a wall, basically, and that's what this is. And I was just always sort of intrigued by the artwork and thought it was an interesting card. Next one, we have Timidity. This was an interesting card. Just a common, I think. It wasn't anything to write home about, but I always liked it as a kid. I thought it was kind of fun watching this like thief snoop through a tomb, basically, and the guy always looked so like startled. And I thought it was always amusing how like frenzied and scared this guy looked. Obviously, the card is called Timidity, so it must be a very timid thief that this person is, or whatever they are. But and certainly one that I always remembered from the set. Next, we have Metamorphosis. I always thought this card was as well very disturbing, very like off-putting. I don't know what it was about this. It's hard to discern exactly what this is. Like if there's some kind of a mummy or if it's like a some kind of a feline cat-like creature. If anybody knows what this is, actually in the comments, let me know. I was just always very disturbed at what was happening to this creature here. It's a very disturbing looking artwork. And just a memorable card from the set. So made my top 10. Okay, next up is the Pyramid Turtle. And for those of you that follow my channel, you know that I like a lot of the turtle monsters from many of these sets. And this one is no exception. It's a cool take on the turtle creature. They have the island turtles. They've got other turtles, right? But this one I always thought was interesting. It's basically just a big pyramid that's got a turtle underneath it. And it's just kind of a fun collision of the Egyptian themes and the turtle creatures. There's a lot of turtles in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I just always liked the card as a kid. Not because it was valuable or it wasn't really that rare. I mean, it is a rare card technically, but I never really had a shortage of these. I think I had a couple of them as a kid. But it was fun. It was something I remembered, and I liked it. Next up, we have Dice Jar. This one, I mean, this is the first of my top 3 here. I just loved the artwork. I thought it was very amusing how they did this. Definitely sticks in your memory. I mean, that's a face you don't forget. That's like a pot of greed kind of a face, right? It's just you don't forget these faces that they put on some of these cards, and this is one of them. Just a card I always enjoyed looking at because it was a funny appearance, and I thought the artwork was clever and reminded me a lot of the Pot of Greeds, and always reminded me a lot of the other jars, Morphing Jar, Cyber Jar, Fiber Jar, all that good stuff. So fun card and funny face. Next we have the Lava Golem. I really liked this card as a kid. I was always drawn to it. I thought it was a very weird artwork. The person like in the cage. Obviously there was that duel in the series where Joey Wheeler was literally in the cage and Merrick was dueling him with it. So it was kind of fun from that angle, right? It had that was a good duel there in the series. And I just thought the whole take on the creature was interesting. The design, just like a big monster of lava that had kind of a fun effect that was unique in the series. So I liked the card, and sure, it's a secret, right, from this set, and it was obviously pretty valuable. But that aside, I mean, I thought it was just a fun monster, and I really enjoyed those couple of episodes from the series. And so my number 1 card, actually, believe it or not, for Pharaonic Guardian is a trap card. Kind of surprises me, frankly, in hindsight, that this is really my favorite, but it is, basically. I mean, I always liked the artwork on this card. It was very simple, but very memorable. I mean, you don't forget this artwork. And I just thought it was really interesting. It was an interesting card in my binder that always stood out in there. And it was a very interesting effect, potentially very usable depending on your circumstances and depending on the duel. So I do remember playing with this a lot. And I liked the card. This was probably my favorite card from Pharaonic Guardian. I liked playing with it. I thought the artwork was very interesting, and it was just a card that I always remembered from the set. So that's all here for Pharaonic Guardian, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments, what cards did I miss? How would you have ranked this stuff if you were to do a ranking like this? Always interested to hear what folks think or what kind of reactions you have to my perspectives on things. Again, this is from a collector's perspective. I never played Yu-Gi-Oh! Much after like 2004. So basically, like, I have a very dated perspective on a lot of this stuff, to be sure. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think, folks. As always, appreciate the time. This is the Parkside Merchants channel. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.